When I found a white envelope with gold embossing in my mailbox, my heart skipped a beat. I knew instantly what it was: an invitation to my best friend Emma's wedding. Emma and I had been inseparable since high school. We'd survived countless breakups, whirlwind romances, spontaneous road trips, and late-night talks where we bared our souls. And now, she had finally met the man of her dreams, Tom. I tore open the envelope and slid out a thick card decorated with delicate floral designs. My lips curled into a smile as I read the words, "Emma and Tom invite you to celebrate the beginning of their life together." The tone was warm and joyful, and in my head, I was already picturing the day. Me in a beautiful dress, champagne in hand, the laughter of friends, and dancing until my feet hurt. My fiancé, Alex, was sitting on the couch with his laptop. He looked up when I beamed at him and said, "The invitation's here. We're going, right?" He smiled back, but something about it felt like off. "Of course," he replied, and I didn't think much of that strange note in his voice at the time. Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparations, choosing a dress, picking out a gift, confirming details with Emma. She sent me excited messages about the cake flavors, the music, the tiny personal touches she was adding. Everything seemed perfectly normal. A week before the wedding, I came home from work to find Alex sitting at the kitchen table, staring into space. I dropped my bag, kissed him on the cheek, and said, "Guess what? Emma wants us to be right there with her for the rehearsal." He exhaled deeply and said something that froze me in place. "I'm not going." I blinked, half expecting him to smirk and say he was joking. "What? You know how much she likes you, and we already agreed." He shook his head slightly. "I can't." "Choop." There was no anger in his voice, no irritation, just a kind of heaviness, like he'd been carrying this decision for a while and had finally decided to let it out. "Explain," I pressed, trying to keep my tone calm even as unease crept in. He looked away. "Just trust me, it's better this way." The rest of the evening, he avoided the topic entirely. I paced the apartment, my mind spinning with questions. It wasn't just cold feet or a bad mood. Something was seriously wrong. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. Deep down, an unsettling thought began to take root. Maybe this wasn't about the wedding at all. Maybe it was about me, or us. I didn't know it yet, but in just a few days, Alex would show me a message, from the bride, that would shatter my understanding of friendship, love, and loyalty. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed Alex's expression. Calm, but strangely haunted. I kept asking myself the same questions. Why wouldn't he go? What did he mean by, "It's better this way"? By 3 a.m., I was pacing the living room in my pajamas, clutching a mug of cold tea I'd made hours earlier. I thought about texting Emma to ask if she'd noticed anything odd, but stopped myself. How could I bring it up without sounding paranoid? The next morning, Alex acted as if nothing had happened. He poured me coffee, kissed my forehead, and asked about my day. It almost made me doubt myself. Maybe I'd overreacted. But every time I caught him glancing at his phone, there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe? By mid-afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. "Alex," I said, standing in the doorway of his home office, "I need you to tell me why you don't want to go." He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. "You're not going to like it. Try me." He hesitated, then picked up his phone. My stomach tightened. Slowly, he unlocked it, scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward me. At first, I thought I was looking at some random text thread. The contact name at the top made my heart stutter. Emma. I read the first few lines and felt my blood run cold. "I need to see you before the wedding. It's important. Please don't bring her. I know this is wrong, but I can't stop thinking about you." I looked up at Alex, my pulse pounding in my ears. "What is this?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Exactly what it looks like," he said quietly. She sent it a week ago. The room seemed to tilt slightly as I tried to process the words. My best friend. My fiancé. A message that sounded intimate, too intimate. So what? She's flirting with you? This is some kind of joke? He shook his head. I wish it were a joke. I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly too heavy to stand. Memories of the past months flashed through my mind. Emma hugging Alex a little too tightly, the way she laughed at his jokes, how her eyes lingered on him when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd brushed it off as harmless friendliness. Now I wasn't so sure. Alex sat beside me, careful not to touch me. I didn't answer her, he said. I'm telling you now because I can't go there and pretend nothing happened. My throat felt dry. Why didn't you show me earlier? He looked at me with an expression that was equal parts guilt and pity, because I knew once you saw it, everything would change. And in that moment, I realized he was right. Nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep that night either. The words on Emma's text kept looping in my mind, each repetition twisting deeper like a knife. I can't stop thinking about you. By sunrise, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to sit in my apartment, stewing in suspicion and hurt. I was going to talk to Emma directly. If she had nothing to hide, she'd say so. If she did, I'd see it in her eyes. Alex didn't try to stop me when I told him. He only said, "Be careful what you're ready to hear." That alone sent a shiver down my spine. The wedding rehearsal was later that day, so I knew I could catch her at the venue before it started. I drove there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Every mile felt like I was approaching a cliff I couldn't turn away from. The venue was already decorated. Rows of white chairs, soft music playing, the faint smell of roses. I spotted Emma near the altar, laughing with the florist. For a moment, I almost lost my nerve. She looked radiant, happy, like someone who couldn't possibly be capable of what I'd seen in that message. But then she turned, saw me, and her smile faltered. Just for a split second. It was enough. "Hey," she said, walking toward me, her voice a little too bright. "You're early." "We need to talk," I said. My tone was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. She glanced around, then nodded toward a side room. As soon as the door shut behind us, I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshot Alex had given me. "What is this, Emma?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she laughed, but it was brittle, strained. "You think this means something? It was a joke." "A joke? You told my fiancé not to bring me, and that you can't stop thinking about him." Her expression hardened. "You're reading into it too much." "Really? Because it sounds like you're in love with him." Emma's jaw tightened. "You have no idea what's been going on." I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "Then tell me. Make me understand why you would send this to the man I'm supposed to marry." She looked at me for a long moment, then said something I wasn't prepared for. "Because he should have been mine." The words hit like a physical blow. I stared at her, stunned as she went on. "You swooped in, and he never even saw me the way I saw him. Until recently." My stomach twisted. Until recently. I realized then that this wasn't just about an inappropriate message. Something had already happened between them, and I needed to know exactly what. For a long moment, I just stood there, trying to process Emma's words. "Until recently" was ringing in my ears like a siren. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't quite catch my breath. "What do you mean, recently?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma leaned against the table, folding her arms like she was bracing herself. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said quietly. "We've known each other for years. I've always been drawn to him, but he only saw me as your friend. Then, a few months ago, we ran into each other alone. It was after one of our group dinners you'd left early. We talked, we laughed, and for the first time, he really looked at me." My stomach churned. I remembered that night. I'd left early because I wasn't feeling well. I never imagined what was happening after I walked out the door. You're telling me that while we were planning your wedding, you were trying to start something with my fiancé? I said, my voice trembling. Emma's eyes flashed. It wasn't just me. He didn't push me away. He kissed me. That was the start. The room seemed to tilt. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the back of a chair to steady myself. You're lying, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. She gave a humorless laugh. Believe what you want, but you came here for the truth. That night changed everything. He started messaging me more, sometimes just about the wedding, but other times it was more personal, more dangerous. And then last week, he told me he didn't know if he could go through with marrying you. My mind was spinning. So you sent that text? Don't bring her? Emma nodded slowly. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, if he came alone, we could finally talk without the charade. I didn't expect him to show it to you. I stared at her, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. This wasn't my best friend. This was someone who had been standing beside me, while secretly holding a knife to my back. Before I could speak, someone knocked on the door. A voice called out. It was one of the groomsmen, saying they needed her for rehearsal photos. Emma gave me one last look. You can hate me all you want, she said, but deep down, you know he's not as innocent as you think. She walked out, leaving me alone in that small, suffocating room. For the first time, a horrifying thought took root in my mind. What if Alex had been hiding even more than she was? By the time I stepped out of the small side room, my pulse was pounding in my ears. My hands felt cold and clammy, but I couldn't wait. I needed to hear Alex's explanation, right now. I spotted him outside near the courtyard, leaning against a pillar with his phone in his hand. He looked up when he saw me, but his smile faltered instantly when he caught my expression. We need to talk, I said, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. He tucked his phone away and straightened. What happened? You look pale. I just spoke to Emma, I blurted out. She told me everything, about the night after that dinner, about the texts, about you telling her you weren't sure you could marry me. His eyes widened in shock, or maybe in performance. It was impossible to tell anymore. That's not... Okay, yes, we talked that night, but it wasn't like she's making it sound. She said you kissed her. Alex ran a hand over his face, letting out a long, frustrated breath. She kissed me, he said, and I pulled away. I told her it wasn't okay, but then she started sending me messages. Little jokes at first, then more personal stuff. I didn't respond to anything flirty. I didn't want to tell you because I thought it would just cause drama. Clearly, I was wrong. I crossed my arms, searching his face for the truth. And the part about you not knowing if you could marry me? He hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. I never said that to her, he insisted. What I did say, in one message, was that the wedding planning had been stressful. That's all. She's twisting everything to make me look bad because she wants you out of the picture. His words made logical sense, but I couldn't shake Emma's final line. Deep down, you know he's not as innocent as you think. Then why didn't you tell me when she sent that text saying not to bring me? I asked. Because I didn't want to ruin your trust in her before her own wedding day, he said quickly. I thought if I just ignored her, it would go away. That's why I showed you the text this morning. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. We stood in tense silence, the sound of laughter and music from inside the venue feeling oddly distant. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But the timing, the secrecy, the way his eyes darted when he spoke, it all left me unsettled. Finally, he stepped closer and lowered his voice. We can leave right now if you want. Forget the wedding, forget Emma. Just you and me. But leaving wouldn't make the questions go away. If anything, it would mean living with them forever. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't ready to choose blind faith over answers. Despite every instinct screaming at me to leave, I followed Alex back inside. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe I just wanted to see Emma's face again, now that I knew the other side of the story. The reception was in full swing, the chandeliers glowing warmly, the band playing something upbeat, the clink of champagne glasses ringing through the air. Emma and her new husband, Daniel, were at the head table, smiling for photos. Or rather, Daniel was smiling. Emma's expression was different. Her eyes kept darting toward us, tracking our every movement. Alex squeezed my hand lightly, as though to silently say, "Stay calm." But when Emma saw us approach the head table, she visibly stiffened. "Congratulations," I said with a smile that I knew didn't reach my eyes. Emma returned a saccharine version of the same expression. "I'm surprised you're here," she replied coolly. "I thought Alex told you." "Oh, he told me," I cut in. "And I'm sure you've got your own version of events for Daniel here, too." Daniel looked between us, clearly sensing tension. "What's going on?" he asked, brows furrowing. Emma laughed lightly, too lightly. "Nothing, just some misunderstanding." "Is that what we're calling unsolicited kisses now?" Alex's voice cut in sharply. The table went silent. A few nearby guests turned their heads. Emma's face drained of color. "You," she started, but Alex didn't let her finish. "I've kept quiet because I didn't want to ruin your wedding day, Emma. But since you decided to twist the truth to my fiancé, I think it's fair to set the record straight." Daniel's eyes widened, flicking from Alex to Emma. "What is he talking about?" Emma's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't answer right away, and in that pause, the damage was done. Daniel's confusion was turning into suspicion. I stood there, heart pounding, watching the cracks spread across the perfect facade of the evening. "Alex, maybe we should," I began, but he wasn't done. "You texted me the night after that dinner. You kissed me without my consent. Then you told me not to bring my fiancé here, and now you're acting like I'm the problem?" "No." The guests' whispers were growing louder. The bride's mother was suddenly at her side, whispering furiously in her ear. Daniel had stepped away from the table entirely, running a hand through his hair, as if trying to process everything. Emma finally snapped. "You're lying!" she hissed. "You wanted it as much as I did." The words hit the room like a dropped glass. My stomach twisted. Alex's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. At least not right away. Because at that exact moment, Daniel turned back toward Emma and said, loud enough for half the reception to hear, "We'll talk about this later, in private." Except it wasn't going to stay private much longer. The night was unraveling faster than anyone could stop it. The room was buzzing like a kicked beehive. People tried to pretend they weren't listening, but every pair of eyes seemed to be on our table. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Emma was glaring at Alex as if she could set him on fire with her stare, while Daniel paced behind the head table, clearly fighting to keep from causing a full-blown scene. I was about to suggest we leave, for good this time, when I felt a light touch on my arm. It was Olivia, Emma's cousin. She was someone I'd seen in passing at family events, but never really spoken to. She leaned in close, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching. "Can I talk to you? Alone?" she whispered. I hesitated, but something in her tone, urgent, almost pleading, made me follow her toward a quiet corner near the coat check. The music from the reception was muffled here, replaced by the sound of my own shaky breathing. Olivia looked at me with wide, nervous eyes. "I don't know how much you've heard tonight, but Alex isn't telling you everything." Her words hit me like ice water. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She took a deep breath. "Yes, Emma kissed Alex that night. But it wasn't completely out of nowhere. I saw them outside on the balcony earlier that evening. They weren't just talking. He was leaning in, closer than a guy with a fiancé should." My stomach dropped. "Are you saying Alex?" "I'm saying it wasn't as one-sided as he's making it sound," Olivia interrupted gently. "I'm not defending Emma. She's got her own mess. But you should know that Alex didn't exactly pull away when it happened." I felt my knees weaken, my grip tightening on the edge of the table beside us. I wanted to deny it, to tell her she must have been mistaken. But the unease I'd been pushing down all evening began to creep back in, heavier this time. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Olivia hesitated, then sighed. Because I've been where you are, believing one version of a story only to find out later that the truth was messier. And I don't want to watch that happen to you. Ah! Before I could ask more, a burst of shouting erupted from the main hall. Alex's voice, raised and angry, cut through the noise. Olivia gave me a look that said, "Think about what I told you," then slipped away before anyone saw us together. I stood there frozen, my thoughts colliding in my head. If Olivia was telling the truth, then everything I thought I knew about Alex, about this wedding, about my own relationship, was on unstable ground. When I walked back toward the reception, I realized I wasn't sure who I believed anymore. When I stepped back into the main hall, it was chaos. Half the guests were on their feet, some trying to calm Alex down, others pretending to be deeply invested in their dessert plates to avoid getting involved. Alex was standing near the dance floor, his hands clenched into fists, face red with fury. Daniel, the groom, stood opposite him, jaw tight, like he was seconds away from throwing a punch. Emma was in between them, crying, though whether from guilt or performance, I couldn't tell. "You think I'd let you get away with this?" Alex's voice cracked like a whip. Daniel stepped forward. "You're in my wedding, Alex, and you're trying to ruin it." "I'm trying to ruin it?" Alex barked back, laughing without humor. "You should have told her the truth, Daniel, all of it." The room went still. Her? My stomach flipped. Was he talking about me? Emma's sobbing grew louder, almost theatrical, and she grabbed Daniel's arm as if to hold him back. "Please, just stop," she begged, but her eyes flicked toward me, sharp and calculating. "Alex!" I called out, my voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. He turned, and for a moment, his expression softened, but just for a moment. "Tell me what's going on," I demanded, walking closer. "No more half-truths. Right now." He opened his mouth, but then I saw it, just for a second, the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. It was tiny, but it was enough to feel like a cold hand closing around my heart. "Emma came on to me that night," Alex said firmly, addressing the crowd as much as me. "I pushed her away. That's it. That's the truth." But I couldn't stop thinking about what Olivia had told me less than 10 minutes ago. I studied his face, his stance, his voice. He sounded convincing, but not unshakably so. Daniel suddenly stepped in, his voice low but cutting. "Maybe you should tell her where you were earlier that night, Alex. Before the balcony. Or should I?" The murmur in the room swelled again, this time edged with intrigue. My chest tightened. Alex's eyes darted to me, then back to Daniel. That hesitation was back, heavier now. "What's he talking about?" I asked, my voice quieter this time, but with an edge that could slice glass. Alex didn't answer. Instead, he reached for my hand, as if to lead me out. "Let's just go," he murmured, but there was an almost desperate note in his voice that made me pull back. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "We're not leaving until you tell me what happened before the balcony." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Daniel smirked, not out of amusement, but triumph. "She doesn't know," he said softly, shaking his head. And in that moment, I realized whatever was coming next wasn't going to just hurt. It was going to change everything. The room was so quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Daniel's smirk hadn't faded. He looked at me, then at Alex, like he held all the cards and was finally ready to deal. "You really don't know?" Daniel asked, his voice low and cruel. "Before the balcony." Alex wasn't just talking to Emma. He was texting someone else, someone he's been hiding from you. My stomach twisted. I tried to swallow the lump forming in my throat, but it stuck. "What do you mean?" I managed to whisper. Daniel pulled out his phone and, with a slow, deliberate swipe, opened a message thread. The screen lit up with a series of texts between Alex and another woman. Not Emma, but someone else entirely. The messages were flirtatious, filled with promises and plans for secret meetings. I stared at the screen, numb. Alex's face paled, and for once the arrogance was gone. He stammered, trying to explain, but the words caught in his throat. "You lied to me," I said, voice trembling but growing stronger. "You betrayed me not once, but twice." Emma's tears turned into angry sobs, and Daniel looked smug, like this was his victory. The guests whispered, some pulling out their phones to record the drama unfolding. I took a step back, trying to process the magnitude of it all. My fiancé, the man I trusted, who promised me forever, had been living a double life, a secret world where I didn't exist. The room seemed to close in on me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but somewhere deep inside, a fire began to kindle, a need for answers, for justice, for truth. "Why?" I demanded. "Why would you do this to me?" Alex's eyes finally met mine, filled with shame. "It's complicated," he said quietly. "I never meant for it to go this far." But the damage was done. I looked around at the faces, friends, family, strangers, all witnesses to my unraveling world. This wasn't just a broken engagement anymore. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than I ever imagined. As I turned away from Alex in the chaos, I knew one thing for sure. I needed to find out everything he'd been hiding, and I wouldn't stop until I had every piece of the puzzle. After Daniel's shocking revelation, the room felt like it was spinning. I needed air, clarity, somewhere to collect the pieces of my shattered trust. I stepped outside onto the balcony, the cool night air biting my skin as I tried to steady my racing thoughts. Alex followed quietly, his footsteps hesitant. When he reached me, there was no bravado, left only raw regret. "We need to talk," he said softly. I nodded, steeling myself for the conversation I had dreaded. "Tell me everything, no more lies." He took a deep breath and began, confessing the tangled web he'd been trapped in, how the other woman was someone from his past, someone he'd thought he could just keep as a secret without hurting me. He admitted to the lies, the deception, and how the guilt had finally overwhelmed him, making him refuse to go to the wedding. "I never wanted to hurt you," he whispered. "I was scared. But I realize now that I destroyed what we had." I looked at him, searching for any sign of sincerity. There was pain in his eyes, but also cowardice. "I trusted you with everything," I said, voice shaking, "and you betrayed me, twice." He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed me his wedding ring. "Maybe it's better this way," he said. The weight of that ring in my palm felt heavier than I ever imagined. It symbolized broken promises, shattered dreams. I realized then that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One where I would rebuild my strength, my trust in myself, and eventually find happiness again. Walking away from Alex that night was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the bravest. Because sometimes love isn't enough when the truth is buried beneath lies.